Mr. Crow 999 here, and welcome to the channel. In today's video, I will be doing a review of Final Fantasy 15. Each game review will be done with multiple categories in mind to be as fair as possible to the game. I will be doing a review like this for many Final Fantasy games, at least the ones I have access to, and can replay them and so on. And they will all be judged on relatively the same categories, although there may have to be some adjustments made due to limitations of the game or new factors that come in with, say, 16. So the categories that 15 and most of the games will be based on will be combat, music, character progression systems, story, characters, and I've broken the characters down into your main characters, your side characters, and your villains, side quests, transportation, and the nostalgia and fun factor. Each section will be scored out of 10, and at the end we will add it all up, and the score will be then decided. Some games may have slight variations in their scoring due to exceptional factors. FF15 will be one of those, as the music section will be graded in 2 separate categories. Each of those will be out of 5, so the final score will still be out of 100. I've decided to make this choice here because the music in FF15 is unique. It didn't seem fair to me to grade the car radio as part of the overall musical score, so the non-car radio tunes will be reviewed in one section, and the car radio will be its own review. Oh, and spoilers will be present throughout. Big spoiler warning. Big spoiler warning from here on out. Combat is our first topic. Combat in FF15 is counterintuitive at best, clunky and frustrating at its worst. My initial playthrough of the game was pre-Royal Edition with the Day 1 launch. I enjoyed playing them, but I suspect that was a new FF factor hype playing a role. Having done playthroughs since then on both the initial version and the Royal Edition, I can say with a more sober approach that the game was certainly trying to have an action combat feel to it, but holding a button down, and that being how a base combo can work, feels weird, when most games have you pressing multiple buttons to perform a multi-hit combo. The biggest benefit of the Royal Edition was adding in the ability to switch between the characters, and having their unique battle styles play as. Had this ability been in the base game, I suspect it would have been better received, but it's there now in the Royal Edition. Changing up who you battle with was a fantastic change, and while I will talk about it more in the progression system section, it is cheap to get there. The most influential piece of gear that was released post-game release was the Ragnarok, a weapon that boosts warp strike damage to the degree that the Ragnarok makes it a weapon that stays on basically the entire length of the game. This can change based on playstyle, but is great for abusing warp strike. If you switch to the other characters, they will play like they do in their respective DLCs, and that can be purchased individually or come with the Royal Edition. Their playstyles are unique, and they can make fighting different types of enemies very different. Shooting birds with Prompto is a nice time that is a joy, or launching a rocket at anything, really. Gladiolus and Ignis have their unique styles, but they do play similarly to Noctis, though it does have its own uniqueness. One of the elephants with the combat is the item abuse. It's pretty rough. The reality is that some of the post-game battles almost require the item spam to be doable without extreme cheese. Though I'm sure many consider the use of items so liberally to be a cheese as well. If you're getting one shot, oh well. If you want to try and fight something 50 levels higher than you after eating a really good meal, go for it. You may not have an inventory afterwards, but you can try. Overall, though, it takes away from the challenge of the game if you can just chuck elixirs at your bait. I mean, party members. Overall, the combat is unique in the series, or at least it is making an attempt to be unique. It does get points for trying to be different, but not many, as in some respects it is trying to reinvent the wheel and makes a trapezoid out of a circle. It does well to show the guys doing tag team abilities and actions, as well as having AI that does things without having to be controlled. The AI does a decent job of rescuing each other and sometimes Noctis, but he does tend to need to be closer to them for them to get their act together. I think Noctis's controls may have felt better if it had button combos instead of holding the button down, and then the attack animation changing if you move the analog stick. The ability to break pieces off of some enemies can affect their attacking abilities and should not be discounted. Some of the larger Imperial mechs almost require them taken apart piece by piece, or else they can simply get into a war of attrition with your inventory and the item abuse. I'm looking at you, Angelus Mech. For combat, the score is 6.75 out of 10. The character progression systems. The primary character progression system for the game is the Ascension system, along with gaining experience from completing quests, fighting battles, and answering multiple choice prompts in a certain way. Experience is banked and only used if you rest at camp or in a lodging as well as at the end of chapters. There's an accessory to equip that will stop the experience from being gained as well. Overall, this can give a sense of lopsidedness as you can save up, gain 10 plus levels without a problem, and go from being a more appropriate level for an area to laughably stomping on enemies. It also means if you play even some of the side quests, you will likely be over-leveled. The playthrough that is being done during the video was in the mid-40s, and I was doing some quests and hunts, and the main quest level was 29. For clarification, while this is being filmed, I did multiple hunts that were in the mid-40s, and the main quest level is 29. The main system to give your characters new attacks, combat, field, and vehicle abilities is the Ascension Grid. For those familiar with the series, it looks a bit like the Sphere Grid from FF10. The grid is broken down into a series of sections that are easy to change by pressing L1 or R1. Main sections include stats, combat, techniques, magic, recovery, teamwork, exploration, weight mode, and after getting 4 royal arms, the armature section. Abilities are learned by spending AP, which is gained from battling, traveling, with upgrades in the exploration tree, choices similar to experience gain, and doing specific actions in battle, like warp striking a vulnerable enemy and starting a cross strike, or doing a set amount of damage in a time limit. Depending on what abilities are learned will depend on the weight and feel its effects will have. Some cheap abilities like aftertastes that boost length of time food buffs last are pretty valuable, provided you get them early. Abilities that are used in combat have some huge benefits, but some don't really feel like they have use. A move like Overwhelm is practically broken, as you get to beat the tar out of an enemy with all party members. Well, they can attack you, but they don't hit you. There are combinations of weapons that can make this even more broken. Armature abilities are pretty useful as well. On the flip side is the in-game grenade that is magic. Magic in most games is cool. It is situational at best here and can be cool for the visible effects, but to upgrade the abilities in the Ascension Grid is a waste. Unless, of course, you want to do something masochistic like a magic-only run. If magic in the game was better, some of the abilities on the Ascension Grid would probably have a bit more use. Biggest thing is that I don't really feel like it's a new system per se, but it's not exactly old school either. It's not a bad system, but it doesn't jump out and slap me in the face with one of Noctis's fish either. Overall score, 7.5 out of 10. The music in FF15 is the next topic, and it offers a unique view on music in the series. It contains music composed by Yoko Shimomura, but it also contains classic tracks from the previous games in the series. As such, I feel it best to review each set individually and then to give each section a score. I will begin with series classics and then talk about Yoko Shimomura's tracks. The car radio. A huge plot point in the game is that we're on a road trip. And you have the regalia, the car, and it has a radio that can be changed with the simple D-button presses and holds to switch albums. There are tracks that come with the car at the beginning of the game, and albums from different games and series that can be purchased from the various truck stops and gas stations spotted all over Lucis. Overall, this is an interesting feature, but it has its hiccups. Some of the tracks are spot on and great for a nostalgia listen. On the other hand, there are some curious omissions or songs I wish had been put in that weren't. For example, Before Meteor has only one track in one of its sections, but the other one has 5 or 6 sections. Why couldn't the first section have a couple more? Why couldn't it have answers? The biggest gripe I have is that while there are a good number of favorable selections for most of the most popular games, why are some missing? Biggest reason on some of that has to do with licensing when it comes to the rights of pop singers performing the songs, but that doesn't affect all the choices. To me, the most complete soundtrack on the radio is FF4. It's pretty much all my favorite tracks in it, and is a good mix of the tracks in the game. Some of the in-game made-for-radio tracks like Justice Monsters are okay, but don't really hit the spot for me. What I found interesting was that the crossovers adding in stuff like Tomb Raider is a bit jarring. I can see why some people would enjoy having some different content on the radio, but it felt to me like it was a Final Fantasy-based radio, and it may have been more preferred to stay as such. The ultimate version of this radio would have been the ability to import any songs saved to whatever system the game was being played on. Since that isn't the case, I have to go with what we have. It does present an interesting problem though. Because the in-game music can't be played on the radio, do I enjoy the nostalgia factor of the music more? Or do I like the in-game music more? In the end, the radio, I think, falls in line with several other decisions made for the game. It is a neat idea, and is executed in some aspects quite well, but it's also exceptionally clunky in other ways as well. It promotes the series as a whole well, but it shoots its own music in the foot, and given how much time in the first half of the game can be spent road tripping all over Lucis, it can take away the original music from the game. Don't get me wrong, I love a bunch of tracks on the radio, and I'll listen to huge chunks of FF4, 7, 8, 9, 10, and a couple others on the soundtracks that are on the radio, but it does take away from the in-game music made for FF15. Score, 3.75 out of 5. Now for the in-game music. There's some very memorable tracks for the game. My initial wandering of Lead, the opening area, when the demo came out, introduced me to Wanderlust. Having some damn Imperials ruin my walking listening party wasn't cool, as I loved the track and how it had this long, slow burn. The track itself feels like a journey and really emulates the game as a whole that starts with you pushing a car and building from that. The game has a multitude of battle themes, with one for each of the areas in Lucis, plus dungeon battles, night battles, boss battles, summon battle themes, and others. For the area battle themes, my favorite is the Clane battle theme, Up for a Challenge. This track hits hard and fast, and until you become a bit overpowered, you can get through most of a full run of the track before a battle ends. Of all the battle themes in the game, this is probably my second favorite in the game. The night battle theme also hits in a way that changes throughout the game. At first, if you wander at night at a low level and stumble across an iron giant, it feels like very much like I need to nope out of this real soon or I'm in real trouble. But as you get stronger and abuse the item system, the song is a fun groove for stomping demons. My favorite battle theme overall has to be the Ifrit battle theme from the end of the game. Nothing quite having a dance feel in your song for a battle where the guy bounces around while on fire, slapping you with a sword. It's a fun theme, and that's a big thing for the end of the game. One thing the in-game music does exceptionally well is that it's very good at setting the right mood for many of the situations in the game. A couple themes seem a bit off, but overall the music fits most story beats and locations very well. This is fantastic in approach. The music can't be blamed when certain parts of the game drag or take too long. It's composed based on the data that is given to the composer. Even within that one section of the game, the music still fits. I don't like playing that particular section at night because my original playthrough was at night, And there's some creepy stuff playing the game at 2 a.m. in Chapter 13 that takes way too long and is full of a bunch of jump scares and is trying to freak you out. I do wish the car radio had a section in the post-game to avoid spoilers, where you could have an FF15 section where you could just listen to select tracks from the game. Some of the songs are tied to spoilers for events that happen, so I would think it would be hilarious and just absurd at the same time if you could hear the Full of Freak battle theme while driving to Galden at the beginning of the game. Cool feature would have been, once you hear the theme in your adventure, it becomes unlocked for the car radio. Regardless, it is a bit of a knock that there is so much travel time in-game, and the only in-game themes you get to hear are when you're on foot or on a chocobo. The chocobo theme itself for the game is fantastic. Riding around that song with that song playing while having a hot pink chocobo for Iris, or a multicolored bird horde riding across Dusky is so fun. Or you can move slowly, and a lighter flute-based version of the chocobo theme playing is great as well. Overall, the in-game music is very strong. It has some memorable tracks outside of those talked about. Score, 4.5 out of 5. Next up is the story. There is difficulty in talking about the story. The base premise of the story is fine and has some intrigue. On the other hand, the execution of the story is something that can't really be complimented. If the story within the game contained the Platinum Demo, Kingsglaive, all of the DLC, then it would have been much better. There also would have needed to have been a few extra cutscenes that we as the player could see that Noctis wasn't around for. A bit like the Niflheim leadership meeting we see in between chapters 2 and 3. We, the player, need more scenes informing us of the overall story and not everything from Noctis' perspective for things to make a bit more sense. This is certainly true of the second half of the game. Giving us some internal cutscenes regarding the downfall of Niflheim would have been great. We get a sense of some issues in Niflheim and Prompto's DLC, but that's not in the base game. The game makes it clear that Arden is the bad guy, that starts a bit sketchy, and the main character suspects something is funny all along. They just don't know what. Even his helping out after they learn he is the Chancellor feels off, but it is all to get to his endgame. What is clear in the base presentation is that Noctis and his companions are the heroes and Arden is the bad guy. It's clearly presented, but the side details that fill out that basic idea are missing. This is the biggest flaw with the story. A simple story can be good if the characters that are introduced and their motivations are clear. Unfortunately, this isn't quite the case. Important characters like Luna don't have the importance that their role in the lore suggests. They should. Considering what Luna is doing running around in front of the party to wake up the Astrals, why couldn't she have just traveled with us? It lets us get to know her more, and she can explain to the player what she is doing, why she is doing the things she's doing. It gives her support role a purpose, we as the player get to know her character more, and it removes one of the biggest complaints regarding her character. Even small rearrangements in character interactions would have done wonders for the story of the game. The biggest change would be to make it so that all content for the game being in the game itself. The other aspect of this is the characters, who appear in multiple mediums of content, be consistent. Whether it is design or character traits, some don't quite appear to be consistent, especially Luna. She is far more active in the story for Kingsglaive while being less than present until needed for the main game. There is some merit to the story. Our heroes are understandable, relatable, and have great interactions with each other. The main villain has his goals clearly revealed, is treated as a villain, and he very clearly acts like one. He has no qualms whatsoever in doing what needs to be done to achieve his goal. With the DLC, he even gets a deeper understanding as to why he does what he does. There's a sense of feeling bad because he suffers a great deal. He loses everything, gains immortality, and must live with being part of the plan to rid Eos of the Star Scourge. though it is the wrong side of that plan. He is the beginning and end of the Lucis Caelum line. The one who should have been king is the one who helps the descendant of the one who usurped him. Its goal of ridding the world of the Star Scourge is complete, but it isn't Arden who defeats it. He is the vessel of it. It is an interesting redemption arc of sorts. Even still, the cost of doing so is high. Though it is in the ending, it is the first time since FF7 that a main character death occurs. It hits hard because we spend so much time with him. Furthermore, a mid-credit scene really hammers home the difficulty going through with what needs to be done. This scene is easily one of the most emotional and impactful in the game, and it's fitting. Like most parts of the game, story aspects are both good and bad, and the version played greatly affects that. As such, both the score for the original game and the Royal Edition will be given. The original score, 7 out of 10. The Royal Edition score, 7.5 out of 10. On to our main characters. First up, Noctis, Crown Prince of Lucis. Noctis is given a fair bit of depth, and the journey really gives a sense of him coming to terms with what his role is. From being hilariously unaware of what is going on at the beginning to coming to terms with his fate with a 10-year nap in the crystal. Despite showing a very emotional scene at the end where he talks to his best buddies, he exudes a different confidence post-time skip in knowing what he must do and putting that foot forward to make it happen. Everyone around him loses something or suffers some nasty injuries, whereas Noctis' losses are closer to being a loss of former self. Don't get me wrong, losing your fiancé is an ugly thing, and that would be hard to go through individually, but what is portrayed to the player doesn't have that connection because there is so little between Noctis and Luna. He's clearly hurting from losing his father, fiancé, and kingdom, but some parts of that get lost in the way the story is told and the format of the game. The pacing near the beginning of Chapter 3 is a great example of this. You go from finding out about insomnia and checking it out, to doing a couple of tomb raids to get royal arms, to beating up some Imperials, to Prompto asking if you can go to the Chocobo farm. Clearly this is an option, and doesn't have to be done, but it takes away from the story immersion. Spending 20 to 30 hours doing side quests is a good time, when it makes sense to story-wise, but the goal of most of chapters 3 to 8 is to find Luna and get to Altissia. Noctis and who he is and how he is relatable suffers from the open world aspect of the game, but if one does a mostly story-focused playthrough, he becomes a much stronger, much more relatable character. And he hits many of the emotional tones that they were going after, I think. Prompto. In-game, Prompto is fine. He's annoying at times if you wander around the field and hear the same line like 10 times in a row, but he does offer some really fun lines as well. Him singing the victory fanfare is quite a treat, and his love for Chocobos is great, if not borderline sketchy. Read into that what you will. There are a couple of optional scenes in the game that offer more of his background and why he is the way he is. His origins are nothing short of grim, and its attraction to some of the more well-endowed ladies in the game are almost teenager-like, especially Cindy. Prompto, with all the side anime and DLC added in, is a much deeper character and has a fair bit added to him. With him being a chunkier dude as a kid, to being a Magitech Trooper clone, and many of his insecurities focusing around trying to fit in, he becomes far more relatable. He's more relatable and is a far better character knowing the side stuff, but that should have been in the game. Ignis. Ignis is the steady guiding hand for the group. His delight in cooking is infectious, and sometimes I wish they spent time on the graphics for each of the dishes he cooks, and put it towards other things that really needed the work. There's a little side quest in Chapter 3 that is only accessible then that gives some foreshadowing to what happens to Ignis. As someone who is not physically disabled, I can't speak directly to what it is like to relearn how to do everything, from basic daily stuff like getting dressed to more advanced things. Learning how to fight monsters again seems entirely otherworldly, and strange enough post-time skip, Ignis feels a bit better in terms of his AI. Again, the event that causes an injury is in the DLC, but it has a direct impact on the mood of Chapter 10 in particular. Overall, Ignis is a great party member and is very different. He is very much the guide of the group and keeps them focused. The guys rely on him, and it's abundantly clear they like what he brings to the table, even with his own circumstances changing. Gladiolus. Gladiolus is my least favorite of the four main characters, and it's not to say that he's bad, he's just not my cup of noodles. He takes his role seriously to the point he goes off to improve himself as a shield, and comes back looking like he was on the wrong side of some big drunken sword swings. His time skip design is one I prefer over his younger self. The others I don't really have a huge feeling either way, whereas his is the one I'm decidedly on his side. He's very protective of everyone, and that trait is amplified by his role in the game. He feels like he has the least depth, even adding in side content as they just explain more about his role more. He's fine for what he is, but he could have had a bit more added to his character, besides slightly grumpy, overprotective Wall. Score for the main characters is 8.5 out of 10. So for the next set of characters, I've listed them as side characters as they have an appearance or an influence in Noctis' journey, but only in a small way or for a limited time. One of these characters will probably have some debate to it, as she was listed as a main character. My reasons for this will be listed in the section where I talk about this character. So the first up is Cor. Corleonis is the first side character to join you, and he briefly joins you in Chapter 2 and gives you the quest to find the Royal Arms. He's powerful in battle and helps there. As a major figure in Lucis, he pops up a couple of times in the story as a way of saying what other Lucians are up to, as well as himself. He assists with Gladio in his DLC, and in the Royal Edition he's present in Insomnia. He's one of the more stable characters to appear throughout the game, but I wish he had a little bit more to him. Iris is the second character to join your party as a battle character and is Gladio's sister. She has a date with Noctis in the story, and is far more present in the game. She's got a fun attitude and a love for Moogles, demonstrated by her creation of the Moogle doll to save Noctis in battle, even if it is kind of cute and ugly. She has a personalized chocobo that is close to a hot pink in color. There feels to some degree that she was supposed to be a bigger part of the story than she is, and her personalized battle features are a suggestion to that. Where she's usable in battle is technically optional, but you can simply choose to stay in the car. Overall, she's probably the strongest female character in the game in terms of development and usability. A nice feature would have been able to see the time skip version of her helping to take back Insomnia with the guys. Aranea, an attitudinally challenged Dragoon mercenary who originally fights the party in Chapter 6, joins to help in Chapter 7, is seen briefly in Tenebrae, and aids Prompto in his DLC. She can also join in battle against demons post-Chapter 7 as well. She's not really a villain, and only somewhat of a hero, but she at least has a presence in the mid to early late game. She has good banter with the guys, and offers some strong abilities in battle. I do wish there was a bit more to her character than what was in the main game and not just the DLC. It's also a shame her own DLC was cancelled as well. Lunafreya. As much as Lunafreya was said to be part of the main story as a main character, she is more of a MacGuffin. Yes, she is the Oracle. Yes, she is Noctis' fiancée. No, she is not memorable in the way you would like to have a character be memorable. Most of the open world main quest line is following her footsteps around Lucis all the way to Altissia. There is one bonus cutscene that we can see where she is healing, but her appearances are few and far between. For someone marketed as being important to the game, that is a facade. Her role and title may be important in the world of EOS, but she doesn't feel like she matters that much to the player. She's merely a means to an end, and she could have been so much more as she started as a different character in development and transformed into Luna. She may be the character with the most regret attached to them, as she should have had a far more central role, but instead she doesn't. Score, for all the side characters, 7.5 out of 10. Villains. There are two main villains to me in the game. These are the Niflheim Empire and Arden. While the Nifs use Magitech, which is not unique to the series and is a big nod to FF6, them being a bunch of demons in suits and clones is some wacky stuff. As much as modernish technology seems to be a thing, looking at you, Audi and Kingsglaive, it does seem to go towards some technology that we in the real world have sort of moved away from in terms of it being either a good idea or a practical idea. As an empire, they appear super strong, given that they whip Insomnia in a night. They also appear to be pretty strong throughout the first 8 chapters of the game. However, by the time you get to their home in Niflheim, they are in a rather spectacular state of collapse. The state of the Empire before the time skip is that it conquered the world and fell apart at the same time through a spectacular death from within, thanks to the working with demons. They are one of the most powerful empires in Final Fantasy, given how much of the world they own at their height, and yet they have such a missing death that it's sad. You don't go beat their emperor per se, but beating his demon transformation is anticlimactic. He's not even a unique demon, more of a reskin. The most unique demon in Niflheim is the half-melted Ravis, who is presented as a foil to Noctis, but is seen so little that is missing something. Niflheim as a whole is a secondary villain, but they disappear in the mad rush of story in such a flash that it's clear their downfall, well explained in little notes left around, is mostly forgotten, and could have been done so much better. Second villain is Arden. Arden is the flip side and the main antagonist. As such, as much as the story is about Noctis, it is also about Arden. His motives do get fleshed out in episode Arden, and some side content, but even within the game, he is given plenty. He starts off as someone of no consequence, even though the reality is he is of major consequence. The boy band being suspicious of him right away, and in every appearance afterwards, is telling. It is clear through most of the game that he is likely a bad guy or someone that will be a pain in the ass to some degree. His design and voice acting add major gravitas to that feeling. When he finally decides to go full ass clown on the party, he gets another level of being a dick the rest of the game. Between taunting Noctis throughout Chapter 13 and his corpse illusion ceiling fan in Insomnia, he well earns his place as a strong villain in the series. Maybe not the strongest, but certainly a good one. He also transformed from being a full madman lunatic to an understood madman lunatic through the DLC and anime. We as viewers understand after these events why he would go to the lengths he would, despite the fact it is mildly insane. In many ways, he is one of the few villains that achieves their goal. He wins. In so many ways, and even in defeat he wins, because he gets to be rid of his enemies and he gets to rest in peace. To be fair to the scoring here, Arden heavily boosts this number. If this section was split like the music section, he would be a 4.75 or a 5 out of 5. So he is the rocket booster on Santa's sack, making the score higher. Score 7.75 out of 10. On to the side quests. There are a bucket load of side quests in the game. That said, there are only a few that are different than a fetch quest. Each Royal Arm dungeon is unique, the acquisition of chocobos is a unique quest, and hunts are somewhat unique as well. Standouts from the hunts are the Catoblepas hunt, Behemoth hunts, and the Adamantoids. Most side quests outside of these are more or less fetch quests, and while one here and there is okay, some quest lines as a whole are essentially go to this place, find a thing. Maybe fight something, maybe not. Return to a place 1/3 or more of the length of the map away. This is particularly noticeable when doing quests from lead, like Cindy, where she will want something from Vesperpool to get for the car, or some of Dave's tag hunts. It's clear across the map. The problem ties back into the load times, especially in an earlier version of the game. It breaks up the playtime so much. Fast travel with 60 to 90 second load times for accepting a quest, then either spending 7 to 10 minutes sitting in your car, or redoing the load time party. Get the item, and then repeat said process. While this isn't the case in all the side questing, it is the case in a few of them. There's too much time not playing the game to play the game for a little bit. There's a level of detriment to the fetch questing in terms of playing the game. Other side quests include photo taking, fishing, and cooking at camp. These quests are unique to specific characters, and it's nice that each one does have their own interest. Gladio has its own thing too, but it's more about walking around on foot, and that doesn't feel as much like a quest as something that happens naturally. Even Prompto's camera skill happens naturally, but you can get battle and accessory abilities to assist with the picture taking, which I must say is done exceptionally well. Some of the AI taken pictures are fantastic. The attention to detail for Ignis's dishes is amazing as well. They look like meals you would want to eat. The battle benefits of the meals he can cook are not to be understated. You can do some massive battle punch-ups with the right meals. Finding the recipes in shops or finding the ingredients in the field or from beating enemies in battle is how you get a large chunk of recipes. But some can be gained by purchasing different meals at diners across Lucis. You can also fish for ingredients with Noctis. You can get different rods, bait, and lines to equip on Noctis as he indulges in his love of fishing. Each fishing area can have different fish depending on time of day, and there are fishing areas dotted across the map. It's pretty relaxing until you get to some of the hardest fish to catch, and then it's a real challenge not to be taken lightning. Overall, except for the pacing of the fetch quest which you can pick up, side questing in the game is a good bit of fun, and should not be dismissed out of hand. If you know the quests you want to do and tailor your adventure to doing those, you will probably enjoy the game a bit more. Score? 8 out of 10. Up next is the transportation. There are 3 main forms of transportation in the game, plus the on-rails train section that is chapters 10, 11, and 12. The first is your generic on your feet running and walking. Noctis does have a unique motion, and he does have a minor limp, though it is nowhere near the level that Regis has in the opening sequence. It can sometimes feel a bit clunky to run, and the platforming dungeon of Piteos is an exercise in frustration, especially if you aren't used to controlling Noctis in minute ways. Overall, it's okay, and given the size of the world, sometimes walking feels sluggish, but it isn't the worst I've ever played. Second up is the Lustrous Chocobo. I love these birds, and the music changing with the speed you are piloting your bird is a great touch. Leveling up your Chocobo requires riding around, and the higher the level you are trying to achieve, the longer you need to ride around on your feathered friends. Running around on Chocobos is fun, and they can get you places that walking is not as ideal for, and they are nice in between when you have longer walking treks from a parking spot to your